Our first session of the afternoon. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is John Rowland. I'm with the California State University Office of the Chancellor. And our session for this afternoon is Specific Wave and PRP update. Big news for big data. And our speakers today, we're going to have Dave Reese and Larry Smarr. Dave Reese, Cenic Vice President of Regional International Activities, and serves as Managing Director of Pacific Wave. Prior to joining Cenic in 2000, he served as Director of California State University for CNET and represented CSU on Cenic boards of directors. Dave has served as Chair of the QUILT Board and Director and continues to serve on the Executive Committee and Finance Committee. He served from 1995 to 2008 as the elected member of the Board of Trustees for the Alta Loma Elementary School District, a K-8 school district in San Bernardino County, serving approximately 8,000 students. Welcome, Dave. Larry Smarr, the founding director of the California Institute of Telecommunications and Information Technology, also known as CAL-I2, a UC San Diego, UC Irvine partnership, and holds the Larry Gruber Professorship at UCSD Department of Computer Science and Engineering. Before that, he was the founding director of the National Center for Supercomputing Applications at UIUC. He is a member of the National Academy of Engineering, as well as a fellow of the American Physical Society and American Academy of Arts and Science. In 2006, he received a IEEE Computer Science Tsutomu Kanai Award for the Lifetime Achievement in Distributed Computing System. He served on the NASA Advisory Council and 4 NASA administrators, and was the chair of the NASA Information Technology Infrastructure Committee and the NSF Advisory Committee on Cyber Infrastructure, a member of the DOE Advanced Scientific Computing and Advisory Committee and ESNet Policy Board. And for the last 8 years, he was a member of the NIH Advisory Committee to the NIH Director, serving 3 directors. Welcome.
Thank you, John, and welcome. I'm going to lead off, and we're going to talk about the Pacific Wave International Exchange. As you heard this morning, Cenic is a lot about collaborations and partnerships, and Pacific Wave is an example of one of those. We operate Pacific Wave with our partners in the University of Washington and the Pacific Northwest Gigapop, and as an example of partnerships, this one has been going on since 2004, and it's a handshake. There is no contract, there is no MOU. It's a cooperative partnership between the 2 organizations, founded on a handshake and continuing to operate that way today. It was the first geographically distributed exchange. Normally in Internet exchange terminology, an Internet exchange is a point, it's a building, it's a switch for those that are technically understand this, and everybody comes and meets together. Pacific Wave is a distributed one of these. It's a set of switches that spans originally the west coast of the United States, now has a much greater presence, and we'll be talking about that. Currently serves 29 countries, and with Transpac out of the Indiana University announced the first 100 gigabit Trans-Pacific link between Tokyo and Seattle just last year. So Pacific Wave, this is the graphic for Pacific Wave showing the reach and presence. Pacific Wave now has incorporated the Western Region Network. I'll talk about that a little bit more, but it gives us 100 gigabit connectivity, not only up the coast of the United States, but over into Denver, Albuquerque, down into El Paso, and back into Los Angeles, incorporating our collaborators in the Western United States, the Front Range Gigapop, Albuquerque Gigapop, and in-car, U-car, and many other important resources in the Western United States that we connect with. There are a number of exchanges within research and education across the United States. List some of those here. You've probably heard of these. Pacific Wave, obviously. Starlight out of Chicago, they were the very first IRNC funded exchange way back. Manlan out of New York, NYSERNet's heavily involved in that. The WIX is one of the newest in Washington, D.C., the University of Maryland and Max Gigapop, and then AmLight in Miami, Florida, with the Florida International University, Florida Lambda Rail, and Heidi's actually here. If you find her, she could talk to you about that exchange as well. So these are ones that are operated by IRNC networks similar to Cenic around the United States and operate as, again, international exchanges. So national and global activities, the NSF supports IRNC exchanges through a very competitive process, IRNC, the International Research Network Connections Program, when they have funding for different categories of backbone, infrastructure, and innovation. There is also another organization called the Global Lambda Integrated Facility, the GLIF is how it would be referred to, and that brings together exchanges from around the world, working together on handling this interconnect of research and education and in support of research and education and other collaborative activities. This is a map that's being updated currently by the GLIF, but this is the world view. I think it's about a 5-year-old map now, showing the amount of capacity you can see in the U.S., quite highlighted, and the number of circuits, probably more so in the European than the Asian side, but that's now catching up, and showing these are circuits that are primarily dedicated to research and education that have been acquired and are operated through these exchanges to help flow, integrate traffic, and as you hear later about PRP, heavily leveraging this infrastructure and doing the various activities. Pacific Wave has been partially supported through 3 separate 5-year NSF grants under the IRNC program, initially through USC, then through University of Hawaii, and the latest now is an award directly to Cenic, and promoting both the 100 gig expansion of Pacific Wave and the implementation of SDX capabilities within Pacific Wave. So what Cenic has proposed and Pacific Wave is currently doing is, with the software-defined networking, how do we have various software-defined networks meet in an exchange? How do you interconnect these multiple domains of software-defined networks in a national and international setting and handle that traffic flow? A lot of questions about how that's done. It's not simply a matter of go find the software, load it, hook it up, and make it run. A lot of this is being done in the development of that and how they're going to support and how they're going to work together. So Pacific Wave is actually building a parallel infrastructure to the Pacific Wave exchange that I showed you earlier, so that there's a little bit of a sandbox over here. And SDN and this new SDX technologies can be tested out, they can be trialed, they can break. All these things can happen, and Pacific Wave remains the exchange that it is today, reliable and very consistent and strong support for a lot of that connectivity that we have going on. So I had found this graphic, kind of give you a quick idea, if you understand SDN, of what it means to take an SDN, an international exchange point, SDN plus IXP, smash that together and come back with something called an SDX. And it really is a matter of having the multiple SDN networks come meet, and then this mythical SDX controller, this piece of software running on it, is there intermediating between these with the BGP protocols from routing and the SDN and SDX, and handling that interconnect of these domains of SDN networks. So a simplified diagram, but I think it's one that at least for those that operate networks and BGP kind of begins to give you a picture of how an SDX network is going to sit in between these. Earlier I had mentioned the Western Region Network. Cenic, Pacific Northwest Gigapop, the Front Range Gigapop out of Colorado, Albuquerque Gigapop out of New Mexico, and University of Hawaii formed a collaboration called the Western Region Network. It's about sharing resources, sharing access to resources across the Western United States. And so out of that, we've acquired a number of 100 gigabit circuits from Internet 2, use those to construct this exchange and this network across the western United States. We work very closely with the University of Hawaii, who is a member of the WRN, but is also an NSF IRNC awardee. So they get money from the NSF because they work together to support a couple of the links that were shown on the Pacific Wave diagram coming from Australia and New Zealand. Those links certainly come across the undersea fiber systems. They're 40 gig today, and there's a pair of those coming across within a few months. We just learned the schedule was moved up. Within a few months, those will both transition to 100 gig, and we will have 100 gig links now going from Pacific Wave through Hawaii on to Australia and New Zealand. So significant increase in capacity happening there. Again, all in support of research and education. Pacific Wave is collaborating with the Starlight Exchange in Chicago on the SDX implementations. Chicago is also funded under IRNC for an SDX capability. So we're working closely with those because not only now do we have SDN networks meeting at an SDX, we have multiple SDXs meeting, and we don't know what that is. Is that an SDX XX? Who knows? So, you know, we have to answer all these questions and figure out how we're going to seamlessly interconnect all these networks and support researchers without them having to go off and take a class in advanced networking. That's the goal, and so we're all working hard to support. We currently have direct connectivity between Pacific Wave and Starlight. We have 200 gigabit circuits, one running directly Seattle to Chicago, and another from Denver to Chicago. A little bit about what's happening. We talked about 100 gigabit links across the Pacific. There are currently now 3 in operation. The Transpac Pacific Wave one I had mentioned earlier. Singarin out of Singapore and Internet 2 have a 100 gig link between there and Los Angeles. We just turned up a week ago the SciNet link with SoftBank running from Tokyo to Los Angeles, so that 100 gig is now moving into production. I mentioned the 2 from Australia, one to Los Angeles, one to Seattle, both going through Hawaii. And end of this calendar year, probably first quarter of next year, there is a new cable system being laid, and that will have 100 gigabit from California to Hawaii to Guam. And if you think that isn't going to make an impact on the island of Guam, the university there is currently, I think, connected with 100 megabits. And next year, they will be connected at 10 gigabits. So imagine that change for the island of Guam. Pacific Wave and Cenic and the HPR network that Cenic operates got together and with the researchers out of Cal IT2 and across the California and Washington, started looking at what we had, this collection of stuff we had. The campuses had their CCINE awards and other names as they've gone through the years, doing SDN and DMZs. And, you know, scientists were still struggling with the complexity of this and how to use the network. And we just sat down and looked and said, you know, we've got Pacific Wave, we've got Cenic's HPR network, we've got all of this stuff, and we've got wonderful experts down in San Diego. And out of that, in December of 2014, hatched this concept of building this Pacific research platform and set a goal that says, okay, we have a meeting coming up in March, let's give a demo. And you figure out that's not much time to put a demo together, and they did it. Put that demo together, that's launched into a grant supporting PRP. Larry will be talking more about that. But it was leveraging the resources we had available, identifying where the shortcomings were, and out of that now is becoming just an absolutely fantastic platform that researchers, again, how do you enable research, how do you enable the researchers without sending them off to an advanced networking class? And Pacific Wave, the PRP and Cenic again, supporting things. So here's the HP REN is one project that's supported about it. I think Larry will mention a little bit more about HP REN. But a big activity because they had cameras up on mountaintops. And you heard earlier this morning the reference to the fires in San Diego. And this traffic graph down here shows those peaks were during fire events in San Diego and all of the activity and the hits that were happening in these cameras because it had a view of what was happening in San Diego that no one else had. And so these are the types of activities that are being supported. And then lastly, my slide, an introduction to Larry, about the Pacific Research Platform and the various sciences that are supporting, that PRP is supporting. And with that, we'll hand it over to Larry.
Well, thanks very much. Appreciate you all being here. I'm going to take you into the Pacific Research Platform. I'll give you an example of why. I just did SpeedNet from my office in Cal IT2, which has, I don't know, 100 and something fibers coming into the building, and you'd think, you know, was bandwidth city, right? And you can see what I got in terms of megabits per second. And then you see below that what the amazing set of network engineers across all of the West Coast who have been working every week on rotor-rootering this sort of second tier of the internet specifically organized for big data. You can see they're getting 500 times that bandwidth. Now, it's all on the same glass, really. It's just that the shared internet is separated from the big data traffic, which is much more, you know, comes and goes. When you need the data, you want to be able to get it fast. An example of how Dave mentioned the NSF has funded 130 campuses in this country in the last 4 years competitively to build things like this on their campus. That is, again, separating from the shared internet. We have one 10 gigabit backplane on the UC San Diego campus for 30,000 internet users. This gives one researcher the same bandwidth. And that's Rob Knight, who's one of the world's top people in microbiome research. And we build these terminating devices. In fact, John Graham down there, raise your hand, builds these things called Flash I/O network appliances that essentially are PCs, but they have 10 and 40 gigabit NICs you can put an optical fiber into. If I come to your lab and give you this optical fiber and say, hey, guess what? You now have 1,000 times as much data coming into your lab every second as you had before. Congratulations. What do you do with this thing, right? I mean, it doesn't fit in your Cat 6 Ethernet. And so, but we make these things and then we drop ship them all over the campuses across the West Coast. And you can see there that it connects the gene sequencers into Rob's lab. That goes through Arista switches over into our big wall. It goes to the San Diego Supercomputer Center, where there's actually a terabit, in excess of a terabit per second, interconnecting their large storage with the compute, and then out over Cenic to wherever you want to go. So all these campuses in blue have received these $500,000 grants to engineer on their campuses these science DMZs that, where's Eli Dart? Eli and his colleagues at the ESNet came up with, and now the NSF adopted what DOE had done. This has happened maybe once or twice in human history. And so now what we're doing is linking those all up. But when I say end-to-end, I don't mean campus gateway to campus gateway. Cenic has already been doing that beautifully. This is third floor of biology building into the room that has the gene sequencers, into where the cluster is, into where the 5 supercomputers and 2 clouds that are part of this go. And the only way I could do this is there's about 100 people working on this project, it turns out. And our co-PIs, where's Camille? Just in case you have other people to talk to. I don't know, is she here? Okay, and then Tom is around somewhere. Yep, the guy behind the camera. And Phil Papadopoulos, are you here? And then, of course, and Frank Furtwine, are you here? Any case, so these are the co-PIs, but there are 50 scientists who have signed up letters of commitment for this. There are the CIOs of all these 20 campuses. There are the national labs, NASA labs, DOE labs, NSF supercomputer centers. And the whole idea is, let's see if we can just build this thing out of the piece parts that are already there. We could never do this. In fact, it was a call for proposals across the country. There's the only thing of this scale came from California because of the existence of Cenic. It's that simple. Without Cenic, and particularly without Cenic being a membership organization in which the members have invested, whether it's the UC or the privates or the Cal State and so on, this could never have taken place. The Office of the President, of course, the 10 campuses of UC is a real core of this. Tom Andriola is here somewhere. And he has been very helpful in supporting getting this going. I'm just going to give you a couple examples of how scientists use this. For instance, doing climate change, the whole global models that are done at NCAR, which are in the Wyoming, actually, Supercomputer Center, going to the NCAR in Boulder, they're, as a result of this PRP, upgrading to 10 gigs. And so Dan Kayan is able at SIO, he has the responsibility for California to give the 50-year forecast at very small levels of detail for all of California and Nevada. So he has to downscale these enormous runs that are from NCAR that he downloads. And this is an example of the red. Keep your eye on the red. That's over 100 for the average summer afternoon temperature. And that's where it will be, according to these latest forecasts, by 2035 to 64. So a huge amount of adaptation is going to go on, of course, all over the world. But California, we want to be in the lead of that. Large databases like the Human Cancer Genomics database that NIH funded to David Hausler at Santa Cruz, UC Santa Cruz. Here's an example of this has completely changed the way that cancer therapy is done, because they sequence your cancer cell that used to be one of your human cells. They differ the DNA and they figure out what mutations you actually got, and then from that figure out the right chemotherapy. So this is downloaded by people all over the country. This was a download rate when they first went in May of 12. By June of 2013, the peak had gone from 1 gigabit per second to 8 gigabits a second, and more recently it's 15 gigabits a second, more or less 24/7, 10 to 15. That's just one database that is critical to be downloaded. And here's the kind of, and petabytes, there's been over 30,000 petabytes just downloaded in the last year. 30 petabytes, 30,000 terabytes. And of course, we think of our research as, well, we're academics, we do big stuff. Well, I've been working a lot with industry. Here's what GE is doing. So instead of 30,000 terabytes a year, it's doing 10,000 a day. So this is going to completely revolutionize the corporate world, and is currently revolutionizing the corporate world, the need for this kind of cyber infrastructure. Again, here are just 2 automated telescope surveys that are producing hundreds of to almost a terabyte per night of data that has to be analyzed, and we're hooking up the end users, like in Santa Cruz, the big astrophysics group, to NERSC, and which is then connected to the telescopes. These are precursors, because only 5 years from now, the NSF is going to put online the telescope in Chile that will be the LSST, and it will have 2 40 gigabit links to NCSA in Illinois and be producing changes in the sky. Anything that changed position, color, magnitude, and then send alerts out to all the other telescopes to look at them. You know how many alerts a night? 10 million. Okay, we've got to get ready for this. So one of the things that is not just supercomputer centers, but for instance, our version of the grid, of the cloud, is the Open Science Grid. There are 130 of these clusters that are part of this Open Science Grid. We're just taking the West Coast versions to experiment what happens if we interconnect them at these speeds. It's amazing. I mean, this is 100 million core hours. Let me remind you that that 800,000, less than a million core hours, is a CPU century, running your CPU for 100 years, 24/7, okay? They're delivering 100 million per month. And you can see most of it is to support the 2 big experiments of the LHC that Harvey Newman and his colleagues will be talking about, I think, tomorrow. But one of the things that I'll just give you an example of is LIGO, which is the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory. How many heard about the colliding black holes were detected, right? Well, we're connecting them. They're connected to the Open Science Grid. They've used 4 million CPU hours just to analyze the data from LIGO so far on the Open Science Grid. They're also used about 700,000 hours for a tightly coupled system at San Diego, so we're going to put them on a 10 gig. I have a soft spot in my heart. This is my PhD dissertation from 40 years ago. It was how you solve Einstein's equations for two colliding black holes and calculate the gravitational waves that come off of them for head-on collision. I had to wait 40 years until the actual waves were found. But this is a totally new spectrum. And so supporting LIGO is going to be just, again, one of these radical changes in how we understand the world. And so the final example is we're linking up virtual reality. So this is the Wave virtual reality system that Tom DeFani has designed and operates in San Diego. We're helping Merced put a cave together, which is then going to be linked by the PRP. And I just want to end by saying, you know, this isn't just for science and engineering. I know it sounds like that, but Tom Levy is going to be getting an award from Cenic for this new project, the Catalyst project, that is linking together all of these universities and museums for digital preservation of global cultural heritage sites that, as you know, are being destroyed as we speak. And the idea is at least making ultra-resolution, multi-billion point LiDAR and other kinds of things. So they are going to be running that over the Pacific Research Platform, even though they weren't a part of the proposal. And that's one of the things we're finding. A lot of groups are coming forward and say, can we be part of this as well? This is Born International. SurfNet in Netherlands is in the proposal as an international partner. Since then, Tokyo, KISTI, and KoreaNet, and IRNC have all said they want to hook their universities up and their researchers to our researchers. So we'll have a whole session on Wednesday. There are flyers out there. It's going to be not here, but in the Hyatt Place executive meeting room from 9 to 11. And then we're going to have a special meeting for people at UC Davis. Okay, that's it.